Thank you so much for coming. My name is John DeBari. I am a city councilor in Ward 4. And welcome to the first workshop for the Design Excellence Project. When I first got here, there were like 6 of us, and I'm very glad that we're a full house now. Thank you so much for taking your time to come and be a part of this important project. To give credit where credit is due, this is largely the brainchild of staff and Emily Bentley, and I don't see her here tonight, but I want to make sure that she is acknowledged for the thoughtful work that she put into making sure that this happens for our community. I'm not exactly sure what else to help start the evening off with, but we're really interested to hear your input in helping us take a good look at our community and provide some input around how we address both the form and function of our community, especially in the downtown and along the commercial corridors in Missoula. There has been some development that's taken place that people haven't liked, and there's a lot of development that has taken place that people do like. And what we want to try to do is capitalize on all of the good ideas that folks have in ways to help reinforce the character of Missoula and to build a community that reflects our interests and as I said, and our character. So with that, I guess I will go ahead and turn this over to Laval. I want to introduce her and Garen Wally, who is staff for Development Services, and Tom Zavitz and Jen Gress, who may still be outside collecting names, and obviously Nori Winter and his staff person, Brad, where are you? Excellent, there you are. They're here from Boulder, Colorado. So with that, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it, and we'll have Laval fill in all of the gaps that I've left out conveniently. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I also want to welcome you to be here for this first workshop, and thank John for kicking this off, and thank the city for taking some initiative here for wanting to have the conversation about design quality for the city. We don't know where this will end up, but I can just tell you from at least a year ago or more, there had been some interest. There had been some reaction to different kinds of projects, both positive and not so positive, and it really elevated the need to have a conversation. We had a little bit of a focused discussion and workshop over a year ago about that, and it helped to set a course for us in terms of what we needed to do to tackle and approach the conversation about design in Missoula. Out of that small workshop, we were able to really come away from it saying we needed to have a bigger workshop and a bigger conversation about how to address design quality in Missoula. And the recommendation from that workshop also was to focus on a few areas of the city. So that's what we're here today to do, to kick it off. And the focus here is within the downtown area and our commercial corridors, and with the interest in how we reflect our character of Missoula into these places and be able to come up with a set of objectives on how we do that. This is a year-long project, as I mentioned, and this is the first of 3 community workshops. There will be the first phase dealing with developing a strategy for how we move forward. And then the second phase will really be into the tools that strategy leads us towards and how that gets implemented through various different techniques. So I'm very excited. I'm glad you're all here. And with that, I wanted to now introduce you to our consultant team for the project. That is Winter and Company. We have Nori Winter here tonight and Brad Johnson. And they have a local consultants also working on this is WGM. And so Jeremy Keene is with us today too. And we are so happy to have Winter and Company here to work with us on this. They have so much experience focusing on design quality in various communities. And I'm pretty sure he's going to highlight a little bit of that as they work through some background and information for us. You can tell we've got some activity for everybody to do as we go through this process tonight. And I hope that you find this a good kickoff and a start to more to come. So thank you, Nori. Here you go.
Thanks, Abel. Good evening. We are delighted to be here. We've had the pleasure of working with the city in the past on some planning projects and with our colleagues from WGM. So we're delighted to take this on. A colleague, Brad Johnson, and I will tag team this presentation. We have about a maybe 30-minute presentation, an overview of the project and some of the design issues and topics that communities generally address. As Val mentioned, we don't know where this is going, only that there's interest, and exploring what makes Missoula in terms of its visual character and quality, and how do you describe a place that is distinctly different and eclectic and quirky and fun and any number of other things. And once you understand that, what do you do about it? And what are the options in terms of the tools, the way you might promote design excellence, either through incentives, through regulations, through educational materials, any number of approaches. And so that's the starting point tonight. You have a great opportunity to help shape things as we go through this. After that presentation, we do have some hands-on activities here. It's a struggle in the first workshop to sort of figure out what's the level of discussion that we need to have, because there's so many things to talk about. But we hope that they will be entertaining and yet also informative and give us a lot of information as a starting point. I'll turn it over to Brad for a bit. I'm going to let him explain just our scope and process, and then I'll come back up and speak a little bit more about some of the design variables that at least we've heard about so far in preliminary conversations. So, Brad?
Thank you. So Lavelle sort of introduced the team, so I'll blow by this slide. A little bit more about us, as Lavelle mentioned, or I think John mentioned, we're based in Boulder, Colorado, but really we work all over the country in a lot of different varieties of communities that are interested in preserving and improving the character of development in their towns. We work on design guidelines, both for historic districts, as well as just for general corridors, downtowns, and different sub-areas within cities like that. We also do a lot of code standards work, design standards and form-based codes, as well as more general comprehensive urban design projects, much like if you guys are familiar with the downtown plan that you have, or the North Reserve Scott Street master plan, which we were fortunate enough to work on with WGM. And one thing that we have learned all through that is that every community is different, the values are different, the character is different, the natural environment's different, and so there's really no one-size-fits-all solution or approach, and that's why we have you guys here and can sort of start to tease out some of these ideas and figure out what's right for Missoula. So a little bit about tonight. We'll give a little overview of the project, talk about the schedule and opportunities for you guys to get involved, much like this, but other subsequent opportunities. A little bit about the Design Excellence Workshop, which Lavelle mentioned, which was held in February 2016, so a little over a year ago. Nori will talk some about design considerations that are particularly relevant in Missoula, and then, like he said, we want to put you guys to work and make sure we hear from you guys in an activity session. So why is the project being done in the first place? Well, some of this has been covered, so I'll just try to get through it quickly, but some concern about design quality of recent projects, some concern about whether a project is appropriate for Missoula. Is it fitting the Missoula character or not? And then some appropriate excitement about good projects and projects that people are really excited about, and making sure that new projects that are coming in are meeting that same standard. So with that, the City Council's directed the staff to go through this process, which, as Laval mentioned, is about a one-year process to work with the community to try to get a handle on this and identify potential character management tools for new development here, as well as renovations of existing development. So stepping back a little bit more broadly about the objectives for the project, this is a map Laval mentioned that the focus is really on downtown and the commercial corridors, and we started to map them, and there are a lot of commercial corridors. Maybe the thinking about design in these different corridors is really different. That's kind of what we're thinking and what we've heard so far, so we want to hear more about that tonight. But identifying design objectives and priorities for these different locations, promoting design excellence across the city, which would lead to economic development opportunities, reinforcing, as I mentioned, the Missoula's sort of sense of character, that connection to the natural environment and what that means relative to development, and ultimately identifying an implementation approach. And that's the part where we said we really don't know where this is going yet. So we don't have any sense yet of exactly what it's going to be, but it could include, in the end, some number of amendments to the underlying zoning, some level of augmentation to the existing design standards the city has, or perhaps some new ones, as well as design guidelines. A little bit about the process. So as Laval had mentioned, I think it's a two-phase process that takes place over 5 steps, and we're really just at the beginning right now. You see all these little red boxes here are opportunities for you guys to get involved and really make your voice heard. So we're really just getting started right here on number 1. That's a community workshop, and we'll have 2 more community workshops over the course of the project, as well as adoption hearings with Planning Commission and City Council that you will be able to attend and make your voice heard. I mentioned the workshops. We also have an online questionnaire. It's up right now. Maybe anybody take the questionnaire yet? Yeah. Okay, that's good. It's about 15 or so that's a great start. That questionnaire is still up. It's at MissoulaDesignExcellence.org. If you want to take a questionnaire about design, now you're going to let us know a lot tonight, which we're happy to do, but if you want to take the questionnaire or invite your friends to go take that online questionnaire, we'd encourage you to do that. That webpage is really the best place for you guys to get information. Products will be posted there, information about workshops, you can find it there. As drafts of any documents that we get developed, they'll be posted there. And Laval might get mad at me for saying this, but she's there for you. If you have any direct comments, ideas, if you leave here tonight and you say, oh, I forgot to mention this one thing, email Laval, call Laval. She'll get that information to us and make sure we have it. So just a short recap of the Design Excellence Workshop. We had, I want to say, about 40 or so community members from a pretty broad spectrum, sort of going through an educational presentation about what other communities have done to sort of manage design character in their communities, and thinking about how some of those things and those ideas and approaches might apply in Missoula. Just some of the activities that folks completed at that event. And so I tried to just put down sort of my takeaway, and we want to hear more from you tonight to see if this is on the right track. But in that event, what we heard was Missoula is unique. It's not just any other place USA. I think that's pretty clear when you walk around here, right? The natural character is very important to sort of defining what Missoula is in most people's eyes. Missoula has a lot of different contexts. It's not just one place and they're all the same. Different corridors sort of feel different, the experience is different, downtown has a different feel, and that we need to, whatever we do, we need to take a tailored approach to developing design solutions. And there's a lot of variety. Not everything looks the same. There's an architectural variety that I think people, at least in that group, really appreciated. A little more about this process. People in that meeting said, there is a need to consider design tools, but we weren't quite sure what they were yet, and there was an importance to have a bigger community conversation. That whatever process we have should be inclusive and educational, so we're going to try to do that. That we need to be careful when we're thinking about new codes, standards, zoning standards, or design guidelines, that it's not too burdensome, both on the administrative side for staff, but also for developers and property owners that are looking to develop, that it's not so rigid that it's stifling creativity or making it too expensive to develop. And that whatever we do needs to be illustrative, graphic, and user-friendly. That perhaps increases in density or height might be appropriate in certain areas in town, but not everywhere. That we need to promote innovation in Missoula, but also respect the tradition that you see in downtown, those sort of traditional historic character that makes it so special. Support alternative transportation, biking, walking, and make facilities and ensure that new development is working towards that end, as well as thinking about transition between commercial areas and residential areas. We know that's always a key issue. I mean, how you transition. Yes, ma'am?
Can you say a word about the difference between design standards and design guidelines?
I'm just about to get there. Look at that, the next slide. So thank you. Thanks for teeing it up. So the way we want to think about design standards and guidelines are sort of two different ways to manage character and development that municipalities often use. The way we try to sort of differentiate between the two is, I want to actually start on the right of the slide with zoning standards. You might be familiar with those if you've worked in the development field at all, but what it does is usually sets an envelope for what the development can be. How tall can it be? How far does it have to be set back from the front property line or the side property line? They're measurable typically. So the building can be 15 feet tall. Well, that's pretty clear. You either meet it or you don't. They're a little easier to administer because it's usually a yes or no answer. The development's meeting the standard or it's not. So measurable, quantitative, predictable. Design guidelines are a little more, Nori always likes to use this term, squishy. They require some interpretation. They're based on a design objective. So a design standard, an example of design standard might be the building shall not be taller than 30 feet. An example of a design guideline might be a building should orient towards the street and the sidewalk. But the design guidelines might go on to say there are 5, 6, 7 options for how a development might achieve that objective. So again, they're a little looser, they're a little more flexible in how they're interpreted. And they're good in that they can respond to different site conditions. Options for implementing design guidelines. Now, they could just be design guidelines that are flat out required. You've got to meet them. They could be that they trigger whenever they get triggered whenever somebody wants to do something that doesn't meet those quantitative design standards. And that if I'm not meeting it, I've got another idea for how I can achieve the intent of the design standard, then the design guidelines might kick in to do what we sometimes refer to as alternative compliance. How are you meeting the code? You might not be meeting the letter of the design standards, but you're still meeting the intent, and the design guidelines can help with that. Incentive-based. So sometimes design guidelines are structured that way. You guys have redevelopment authority here and your URA districts. Sometimes it's when a developer is asking for something that the city either is providing funding for development through the redevelopment agency or some other mechanism where they're asking to do something that's outside of the realm of what's allowed. And at that point, we say, through an incentive-based approach, if you want this extra thing or you want to get by with sort of bending one of the rules or you need a zoning change, if you're going to do that, you got to meet the design guidelines. And then a final way that they could be used would just be advisory, educational, a tool that could be used by staff and others, residents, neighborhoods, and developers to sort of take a look at what are the options for new development, but that they would not be officially required. So all that's still on the table. They cover typically a lot of different topics design guidelines do, from building design and the arrangement and design of a facade, how elements are spaced, architectural character and materials, maybe providing a list of several or many options for materials that are the community decides are appropriate in Missoula. Scale and form and how you break up a building to make it a little more humane or human scale. Cover site design, so the arrangement of elements of a property, where the building is, where the parking is relative to the street, how the landscaping fits in, things like that. Design of parking, and signage. So those are some of the big ones. There's a lot more detail under there that I won't go into right now, but they're comprehensive. It will be a comprehensive approach to design, so we'll be covering a lot of topics within these headings. When you're thinking about design in here, we've got this map up here. This is our corridors, and that big piece of bubble gum there is downtown Missoula. And so usually when you're thinking about design guidelines and managing character, you're asking yourself a question: is the objective to maintain the existing context and the existing character? I'm sort of thinking, I'm starting to get a feel that that's how people feel about downtown. Is the objective to create or improve an existing character context? Or maybe in some cases it's some combination of those. And so thinking about context and how design guidelines would be applied in different areas. And when we're thinking about design, we're really always thinking about what the interface is between a development project and the public realm, the street, the sidewalk, how you experience or observe a development from your car, from when you're riding by on your bicycle, or even when you're walking down the street. So what is that sort of relationship between the private and public realm? Also interface with adjacent uses. I mentioned transitions to residential areas, for example. You see here a newer development in Denver next to a lower scaled traditional house, and how it sort of stepped down in scale to try to provide a sort of sensitive interface with that existing smaller scaled residential development. Okay, you're on.
I'm on. So what are some of the design variables that communities think about and that we've already begun to hear about here? I'm going to talk a little bit about downtown design variables and then switch over to corridors, because there's a lot of spaghetti on the map that is a part of the scope of this project as well. Compatibility is certainly a consideration, and striving for compatibility that also stimulates creativity and innovation, which means figuring out what the fundamental principles are of city building for downtown that aren't a matter of style, that aren't a matter of a very limited palette of materials or design techniques, but perhaps something more fundamental than that. And part of that has to do with some of these other design variables. Articulation, we get paid extra for using that word, but what it means is a variation in building mass and wall planes, or in some way breaking up or breaking down the sense of scale of a larger building to have a sense of human scale and to relate to the traditional scale of downtown without saying everything's got to be 2 stories or 4 stories even, or whatever. But that massing of a building is a variable to think about in terms of compatibility. Street level design and the interest at the street level. The most obvious is storefronts. That's our tradition that we have in downtowns. You walk by and you see goods and services and activities going on inside. But there are other ways of achieving that street level interest, but that is a fundamental principle that certainly exists in downtown Missoula. In addition to that, architectural character and materials, a palette of materials, at least the scale and the texture that the materials convey, whether they be old historic ones like brick or new innovative architectural metals or something or other, those that provide scale are often ones that are considered to be appropriate in a downtown. And then the transitions, they're called, used to be called buffering, but the thinking has certainly changed in planning and urban design in this day. Buffering means I can't think of anything better to do, I'm going to put up a screen. And transitions means we're going to be good neighbors. If we have a lower scale residential neighborhood abutting the edge of downtown, we're going to think of ways to do that that is compatible, rather than sort of turning our backs and pretending that there's no interface there. And so some of those may have to do with sensitive land uses. Others may be addressing changes in scale, stepping down of buildings near edges like that, and certainly relationships to historic resources and outdoor places. Now, the policy base that we're starting from is certainly from the comprehensive plan, but also from the downtown master plan. And there are a series of statements for each of the sort of sub-areas that are defined in the downtown plan. We're not going to read it, but just for some of you who probably participated in its development, there's some very good starting material there that basically talks about downtown being pedestrian-oriented, that the cars are subordinate, that there's a sense of continuity while there's diversity of expression and design, and even within the different sub-areas. That those are some of the fundamental ideas that are coming out of the downtown plan that we're aware of. What do some of those things mean, and how might they translate into design? Here's an example of an analysis of a traditional Main Street downtown area. This is actually Galveston, Texas. But the point is here that if I stood on this street at the turn of the century, I would recognize 2 or 3 different styles. To us, they all just look historic. But back then, they weren't. They were different styles. But there was a continuity here in terms of first floors being very transparent, upper floors being more solid with vertically punched windows, horizontal moldings and cornices aligning down the street, and then an expression of the widths of the lots of the buildings vertically articulated in different ways. When you diagram that, that's a diagram for one new infill building in the context of downtown Galveston. It illustrates the concept of varied massing, of understanding that skeletal design relationship that buildings there use to fit in with the traditional ones. The street level interest can go beyond that of storefronts. It can go into things such as wall murals, arcades, landscaping, a menu of ways of achieving street level interest. And some of that may be appropriate in more areas than in one place than another. It may depend on the building type, the functional requirements. All of those are ways of expressing the idea of pedestrian level, street level interest without always saying it's got to be 50% glass. So thinking about what are the fundamental principles of design in downtown is very important. Architectural character. Is it a mountain town? Are we looking for mountain architecture? Or is it something broader than that? Is it more fundamental? Is it the use of massing to reflect traditional scale while accommodating larger buildings? Is it a palette of materials? Those are all design variables to be thinking about. In terms of form and scale, the articulation of a building, this is an example of a single development that is expressing the traditional lot widths and the horizontal alignment and even adding extra floors. Now, I'm not suggesting that's the design solution for Missoula, but it's an understanding of that framework of development that may inform downtown design. Transitions may involve how you step down next to sensitive areas, or even plan for interim development that may form part of that transition in multifamily townhouse development around the edges of downtown. Some examples of how transitions in downtowns or commercial corridors can be accomplished. This is an example here of a commercial strip corridor building being illustrated, a sensitive edge, that is a traditional single-family neighborhood over on the left, and along the backside edge of the commercial corridor, introducing, in this case, one option of multifamily carriage houses, which are adding to the housing stock and creating a compatible transition from the commercial corridor to the single-family residential area. Is that a tool that's appropriate? Does it fit? Does it work in any place in Missoula? It might. There are other devices that can be used that relate to stepping down scale, adding uses that are compatible as transitional uses along those edges to be considered. And then finally for downtown, while architecture is a lot of the focus in terms of compatibility in many communities, the creation of more places for people to interact outdoors is also a part of the conversation. within courtyards, plazas, walkways, interconnecting places that link different projects and different developments are all possibilities that can be a part of the conversation. Now, if we move out to look at the corridors, you'll be able to see these closer because you'll have maps of these to look at in a moment. They're color-coded into some different categories that we'll be working with later on. But some of the variables that communities are dealing with in terms of corridor design, and these are areas that we're really seeing transformations, retrofitting, incremental improvements, various scales and speeds of change. But the fact is that corridors are changing across the country because retailing is changing, our driving habits are changing, our expectation of being able to walk and bike is changing. All sorts of factors are influencing that, and each community is dealing with it in a different way, but there is a general trend toward rethinking corridors and the level of intensity of use that they have. Because generally speaking, they're very low intensity of use. So some of the variables on corridors are building placement. Historically, it was always pushed back to the back with a lot of parking in front. Many people are rethinking that and rethinking where the building might be located. The street edge character itself. Is it landscaped? What does a pedestrian walk along? What is the expectation for the pedestrian? Is this one that we really expect to be more active as a neighborhood serving corridor that people are literally walking to? Or is this one where we still recognize it's mostly going to be an automobile corridor, but we still want to make it friendlier for the pedestrian, even if it's the fact that I drive to strip center A, but now rather than having to get back out onto the street and drive to the next one, B, I walk between the two because it's comfortable. That has automatically cut auto trips down. There are any number of merits in doing that. So when we think about being pedestrian oriented along a corridor, sometimes people think, oh, it ain't going to ever happen. But it can happen in pockets, in nodes, and in some cases along entire corridors, and that's something to be thinking about. So other variables are where the parking is located and how it's designed. To what extent are buildings articulated? To what extent do they express a scale along a corridor? The idea of four-sided design, that there is no backside to a big box, is something that many communities are now beginning to think about because someone's on that backside. And so that's a consideration. And that leads to, again, thinking about transitions into neighborhoods and even signage. So let's quickly look at a couple of these things. Don't want to take too much more time here, but we do want to acknowledge that when you think about design ideas, principles along corridors, you do have to think incrementally. And so this is an example of a fairly conventional strip center with a large field of parking and what are called pad sites out front, where cars circle like sharks around them, doing the drive-through window. In this case, there's still a little bit of open space. Maybe there's a creek or an irrigation ditch or something rather running behind there. Step one might be adding more development along the highway edge in small clusters that begin to create small places. Some parts may never redevelop. They may remain small scale along the edges. And then in time, even more infill and development may occur. Now, part of this is as markets support it. Part of it is as we recognize that now maybe we've over-parked some of our shopping centers. We don't need all of those parking spaces all of the time, and that better utilization of that land is something to be considering along the way. Here are a couple of examples. These are from Denver after their new code was adopted. Here's an Office Depot, fairly familiar kind of setback from the street situation, right? Here it is here. Now this is an aerial photo of today. We don't have the before, but what I'm going to show you are these two new buildings here and this new building, which have all built up closer to the street edge now. These smaller ones, we get paid extra for calling them liner buildings. But this is an Office Depot that redevelops and moves up here. And this is a liquor store called the Argonaut that was located back here and that moves up to the street edge. So here we are before. Here's the Office Depot built up to the street edge. Same business, same site, but making better use of the land with more of the parking behind. But retaining the old building as well. That is all a part of that development. So again, it's increasing the density or the intensity of use on the site. Next door, here's the old Argonaut set back with a double row of parking in front. And here's the new Argonaut. There is some teaser parking that is screened here. There's enough to be visible from the street, but the bulk is to the interior and another anchoring liner building. So an incremental transformation of individual property owners redeveloping here, meeting those standards. Now, while we think about the dream for a lot of it is higher density, retail, even mixed use projects that include residential or office on upper floors along those street edges, that ain't gonna happen every place, and we still have to make room for some other kinds of uses, like gas stations. This is a gas station. It's the same program. It's the same, how many gas stations have the little convenience shop now with them? That's pretty much the model that everyone has. This one locates that building up on the corner. So it has entrances from the street for pedestrians, and the main business end is back here. So here's that building at the corner. Here are the pumps. It's not like it's a continuous street edge, but it's beginning to anchor this corner by bringing that building up to the street. And what's also interesting, here's another liquor store. This site is scheduled for redevelopment, and the new development is going to come up to the street edge. So in anticipation, that gas station has already begun to define a street wall that will be more pedestrian oriented. We're still going to see, this is a major arterial in Boulder, we're still going to see a lot of traffic here. That's not going to be our little shopping mall, pedestrian mall by any means, but it's doing that. Here is another example. This was a shopping mall that was rebuilt, transformed into a lifestyle center essentially, with these that are double-fronted buildings along the street edge. They orient to the parking, but they also have a street edge here. And here is that street edge. Now, these aren't built to the sidewalk. There's a little bit of buffer and landscape area. Some of that is used for outdoor dining spaces, such as where you see the umbrellas here. And they have entrances facing the street, but also in several cases, rather than active windows, these are murals of the goods and services that are available inside. The real active side is interior to the shopping center parking area, but it's double fronted. It's doing a little bit of both. And here's an example. Here at this corner is a Chipotle, and here's their outdoor dining area here. The weather's not terribly nice, so no one's out there. I think maybe one soul is out there, but that's the street edge side, and here's the other side. So it's working both sides of the fence, if you will. Yes, ma'am?
I was just going to ask, so the business goes all the way through with the double?
Yeah, these are fairly shallow depth things, and so these are situations, often they work again in old shopping centers where the main building stays and you put this liner building up front, and they're not terribly deep. Some will have shops on both sides that are different. That's done, but often you'll see them operating this way.
Seems to me like having two would work better, because everybody always tells us that we can't have two entries.
Well, we hear that, but people do it, and they make it work. And particularly when you have a controlled side where it might be the outdoor dining area, for example, it's pretty workable. So very briefly, the range of street edge character can range from build up to the street edge to have some sort of an attractive setback, whether it's landscaped, a patio, an active courtyard, but it's not cars. To, yes, it's going to be cars, but it's going to be landscaped. So there's sort of a spectrum of corridors and expectations, and some of them have a mix of all of those happening. So here is an example of one of those in action, where there is a general alignment, but not necessarily a totally rigid alignment in a corridor versus a downtown, with some of those outdoor spaces, wider sidewalks, outdoor dining areas, et cetera. But the bulk of the parking is behind. And again, sometimes those breaks in the spaces in between to connect into other places. Corridors may see articulation of buildings. This is a series of large buildings that are using different design techniques to break down the perceived scale, to make it a little bit more walkable, to make it look a little bit more like a main street while it's in a highway context. That articulation can happen in a variety of ways, and sometimes communities will have a whole menu of suggestions of how to articulate, from creating different skin variations to massing changes, to having changes in materials, to having wall offsets, a whole combination of different ways of creating diversity in modulation. The idea of forward-sided design, this is one example from Goodyear, Arizona. And Goodyear is a suburb of Phoenix, and what's been really interesting is they have made good design a selling point, a marketing point for attracting businesses to the community. And it really tells, you can, the moment you drive across the line, even though they're using the same palette that exists throughout Phoenix, there's something about the continuity, the distinctive identity that exists there that's really pretty interesting. And so here is an example of one building. Here is its front. And it's a big box, and it has a canopy here that's a sort of blue arch. The secondary walls, the side walls, all have a certain amount of treatment to them, and the arch gets reinterpreted. These are lights that light up, that highlight the walls at night, just to make them a little bit attractive, because there is parking along the side, and people are parking there and walking. And then even as you move around to the backside where the service bay is, it's dropping off in terms of the amount of detail and design and materials, et cetera, but it's four-sided. There is a sense that you know that where that building is and how it fits into the overall development. And this is in a very large shopping center. Those transitions along corridors can take different forms, and it also, the mix of uses can take different forms. This is an example of design standards in which buildings are to align at the street edge. These are the commercial uses, retail below, upper floors, offices, or residential, and townhouses acting as a transitional use between that and the single-family neighborhoods that they abut, which is helping a transition in use and scale, and also, of course, adding more housing product availability to the community. Another example of that concept here of corridor-oriented buildings here, generally a mix of uses, transitioning to townhouses, and then transitioning to the single-family neighborhood. Now, this obviously has limited applications. It's got to be where lots are deep enough, where the zoning permits it, et cetera. But these are all design variables that communities are working with. And there certainly is signage, and we will be looking at that, and we certainly know that all of the corporations know how to respond to good sign codes. They just have to be told to. And along that line is franchise architecture, and this is a really interesting exploration. This is from a series of guidelines for Goodyear, Arizona, sort of saying, at what point does the logo color for my building stop being just an accent to my building, and when does the building become the sign? At which point then is it meeting the sign regulations? Because there is a threshold there when it stops being architecture and is a sign. And so that's a consideration in some communities. This is something that Goodyear was struggling with quite a bit. Fortunately, today, we're seeing a trend in many communities where many of the franchises, of course, know how to play with good design when they're told to, when they're required to. But also the market is leading them there as well. And so you're certainly seeing better designs for McDonald's and Burger Kings, et cetera, across the country. But nonetheless, they know how to play the game when they're told to. And so here is an example. These are two Chick-fil-A's. This one is in Goodyear. It's very much the palette of the Valley of the Sun. It's buff colors, its landscaping is related to that. What is interesting, and this is something that a lot of communities are dealing with, is with fast food or window serving commercial, even the orientation of the queuing lines and the orientation of the building is a variable to think about. Here, the front of the building facing the street is not a row of cars. They are perpendicular to the street edge in terms of the way they're queuing. So some of those are variables that people are thinking about. But here's one in Denver, another Chick-fil-A responding to that same Colfax Avenue that I showed you where the Office Depot and the Argonaut liquor store are. This is the Chick-fil-A that has come into that same transforming corridor. So again, they can respond to different contexts. And then lastly, to note that there's got to be room for all of the uses that we're accustomed to seeing on a corridor. We're not turning them all into main streets. And so how something like an auto dealership is a good neighbor in a transforming corridor is also a part of the conversation. So, yes, ma'am.
So is there any differential when a building like, say, Office Depot moves up to the street edge, or they're located back behind the parking? Is there any differential to their business?
Is there a difference to their business as to where the Office Depot is located? In most of our situations now, anecdotally, and we actually are going to have an economics consultant helping us review some of the economics of design. But no, generally speaking, those same goods and services are delivered and received in pretty much the same way as they always have been. In some cases, and I'm thinking of the one in Grapevine, Texas, in some of these cases, they get a stronger neighborhood base of customers because it's more accessible, more walkable. Now, whether that made their business better, I don't know. But in general, it's certainly equal. So those are some of the design variables that communities are thinking about. And I'm showing them just to stimulate thinking, not that we're headed there by any means. But it might help in your conversations now. And I'm going to turn it back over to Brad, who will lead us through some of these activities that we have for you this evening. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any examples or anything for the streets that don't line up in a grid, like around the street corridor, where we have this triangle, how to deal with that?
Yeah, yes, and we will need to, that's a very good question. Brooks, because it cuts at an angle, you get a lot of snippets of parcels. And that limits things, but it also can create some opportunities that are interesting. Assembly of parcels may be a part of the necessity there. But what that says is we have to be cognizant of different scales of parcel sizes in addition to the triangular pieces that you get on Brooks. And I kind of maybe blazed through that pretty quickly, but the transformation of a large, deep lot with a big box behind where there's room to do liner buildings and room to do townhouses, et cetera, is very different from a corridor that may be only 150 feet deep, where there's much more limitation in how much you can rearrange the game pieces on the board. We have to be cognizant of that and think about those. And that's partially why we're going to be asking you to comment on some different corridors here, recognizing that they are very, very different in terms of their opportunities and constraints. Yes, sir.
Do you have any examples where the sense of place and identity of the town was actually preserved through these design standards? That's the same Disneyland kind of suburban sprawl you see in California and Washington. It's lifeless. You know, it's a good example of like Bozeman used to be incredibly architecturally diverse. And now it's just a whitewash of bricks, some stone, throw some arbors on it, throw a couple of big windows in it. Like all of Bozeman is gone. I mean, what defined the place is gone. And I really hate to see that come to Missoula, so we said, look, we're just now a suburban sprawl of Washington State sprawl has been placed over Missoula. I mean, do you have any examples of like how this kind of thing like enhanced the community that was there? It said, this is the architecture, this is the place of the downtown and this strip, and this is how that's going to enhance and improve with this development. So it looks like that place. It doesn't look like the suburbs of LA or the suburbs of Seattle. That stuff is a great example of those suburbs, and they look like every one of them. I mean, it's like Disneyland. It's it's just out of a book. Is there anything that preserves the place that was there before these were put in?
Well, that's, I mean, I think some of these communities do have some sense that that is a part of their identity. Just, I mean, Goodyear being an example, I think. But that said, that's why we're really trying to have you help us define what is it that makes that, what is the essence of Missoula, that doesn't get lost. And so, yes.
To go along, but also sort of counter his argument, if you go to London, tourists go to London because you can go to the riverfront section, which is incredibly historical with ports and everything, and then they go to downtown, which is the business center, and you have these high-rise buildings, which are, I mean, you've never seen them anywhere else in the world. So it kind of depends on your neighborhood. And this is part of, you can't stop the city from growing. Do you want to keep all of the city like it was in downtown? Do you want to define a new style like they have in Berlin for their new buildings? I mean, it's really, you can infuse taste from the culture with the new building as well. So it's, I wouldn't say you're wrong. I definitely agree with you that you can very easily become generic. But you can also do new style tastefully.
So, right. So, no, I mean, this is a great discussion, and I don't want to stop it. I'm hoping that we can try to get at that in some of these activities, because it is finding out what is that essence of the eclectic, crazy place here. And someone we were talking to earlier today said this, which really struck me. She said, it all blends because it all doesn't blend. And I thought, wow, you know, there's something there for us to think about. And so that's the sort of thing that I'm hoping we're going to get a better sense of. Part of it, in the earlier conversation we heard, is this sense of connection with the place, with the mountains, with the river, with the natural setting. And so part of it might be simply the fact that that there are always opportunities to see that, rather than having a solid street wall, for example. Maybe that's one of those answers. Maybe it's that, you know, the eclectic mix of building forms and materials just continues. Maybe that's part of it. Part of what we're talking about here is building placement and location and intensity of use, not necessarily theme, not necessarily architecture. And maybe that's all that it needs to be, is to talk about what's the character of the street edge, and we're done. But that's for you to help tell us. So this is great discussion, and we'd love to keep it one more, and then we need to move on because we don't want to keep you all too long. Yes, sir. What is the role of the historic board? Yes. The question is about what's the role of historic preservation in the community, and it's a good opportunity to make it clear this project is not dealing with the historic districts and is not dealing with preservation guidelines. That said, we know that compatibility with those as existing neighborhoods and existing places is something that this project does need to address. it is possible that the process used and some of the tools that might come out of this could also then be applied to neighborhood conservation programs, to historic preservation and historic districts. But that is not a focus right now of this particular project. So I appreciate that question to give us an opportunity to clarify that. So,
it should be clarified, though, that the downtown is a historic district.
well, the downtown is an historic district. It absolutely is, yes. Okay, Brad is going to lead us through these activities now.
Okay, so you're going to see on your tables 3 sheets. The first 2 look like this, Activity 1 and Activity 2. Directions are on the sheets. Activity 1 focuses on the downtown, and then in Activity 2, we want to ask you to start thinking about what your design.
Okay, showtime. You guys have been working very hard, and I'm amazed at watching what you've produced. And we promised to get you out of here at 8 o'clock. So our dilemma is we have 80 some odd people with a lot of great ideas we'd like to hear about. We're going to have to rely on what you've written down for a lot of it. I am going to ask for some very quick reporting, but while doing that, I want you all to be looking at the material on your table and think of anything that you heard that needs to be written down, because if it isn't written down, you didn't say it as far as I'm concerned, because I didn't hear it. So keeping that in mind, we're just going to go around and let's see. I'm going to do like these first 3 tables here. I'm going to ask you for one of the statements you made on the first activity sheet. And then we'll go to these tables in the back here for one statement about the second activity sheet, and then we'll go over to some of these tables for the third activity sheet, so you can kind of get ready. And again, very, very quick. You get 1 minute. So you get to go first, Crystal, or Brandon. Who would like to stand and deliver here?
What do you want to say?
This is table number 8. Who's talking here?
So one statement, I think we talked about kind of a diverse, eclectic style, that eclectic nature of Missoula.
This is downtown?
Downtown.
Down, diverse, and eclectic. Okay? All right, that's good. Short and sweet. I love it. They follow instructions. Now, this table won't, but that's okay. All right, go for it.
Although we may surprise you. So for us, this is table 3. And for us, we think the skyline and visibility. So we don't want any buildings that are going to compete with the M and the landscape itself. So
that visual connection to the outdoors, to the mountains. Okay, great.
I'm the only guy here at the table,
So there was a lot of consensus here, huh?
yes. There was extensive use of brick and stones. Yep, table 2. Also the building height, the fact that they were no higher than about 6 levels or so, that it's very consistent. We like the parking, the fact that it was we think, fairly easy to park, and the fact that you can park your car, pay, and move your car if you want to go somewhere else. Some of the guys didn't even know that, so.
Oh, yeah, I love that kind of a system. Okay, great. So that was 3.
I said that's brand new, most people probably didn't know.
Oh, brand new. Most people didn't know that you could do that. Okay, so a statement from activity sheet number 2 from you guys. So what color did you have? You had orange. Who wants to give us a quick summary of what your comments were? Go for it now.
I talk all day.
I can't even read it up to.
It's facing her.
Most of our corridors, we wanted to increase the pedestrian walkways and create spaces for them, as well as revitalize the businesses within the area and create connectivity from parks.
So was there any one that was different, or that was generally a consensus for all the orange ones? Well, that's fine. No, I'm just curious. So if the East. So East Broadway may be a little different because of the river edge. Okay. All right. Good. What about you guys?
Sure. Yeah, activity 2, neighborhood corridors, we were purple. So we noticed on 3rd Street and Orange Street that we wanted to separate those corridors because they seemed different in different places to us. So one part of 3rd Street we wanted to preserve as is, and one part we wanted to make, allow it to be more like, Reserve Street or something. One part of Orange Street was kind of a mixed use street fronting businesses like the Hip Strip, and then where it turns into Stevens, just kind of keep that as is.
Great. Very interesting. So some different contexts within individual corridors. Okay. Yes, sir. Jason.
All right, we're table 6. So our core statements for this area, which is obviously pretty diverse since it's the spoke or the center hub of the 5 areas here, to embrace and encourage diversity, to get beyond the pattern language, encourage the funk that is Missoula. Basically, to embrace the odd resolutions in the pattern language. That should be taken as opportunity, not choked and stifled out as being not part of what the rest is. We like the idea of the pockets of Missoula that encourage you to stop and take pause, that break up sort of the monotony of what something can become.
So celebrate the surprises.
Absolutely.
Let them happen. Okay. So we've done 2. So where are we now? I've lost count. Still a corridor sheet, or no? You guys are ready to report on. Which one are you ready to report on? 2. Yeah, let's do one more on 2, and then we'll switch over to the 3rd sheet for these guys. Huh? This is 7. So you had orange city corridors.
Russell's year was different. You want to do Russell?
So we thought Russell Street was had several different characters, and it's such a long street, and near between the river and 3rd is different from between 3rd and Mount, which is different through Midtown and beyond. Okay, that's me on Russell Street.
Oh, well, let me add something then to it. What we would like to see is more trails and sidewalks. Those seem to be fairly absent right now. And maybe another word for double fronting would be make the buildings permeable
Permeable buildings. Okay, and we're not talking about rain. No. All right. Okay. All right. That's a good idea. All right. Now, so moving into the 3rd sheet, which had a lot of stuff on it. So you guys want to take one of your corridors and walk us through what you found?
We had a strong team feeling for Brooks Street at this table. So we found it a little tough to break it up by materials. I think the consensus was we liked the mix of materials, not just picking one. Fine. But going through for bricks, we liked maybe some architectural glass and storefronts. We chose B, E, F, and H as our primary materials. And then in building placement and setback character, we felt B and C would be the most appropriate. C being where it is possible on Brooks, since it's a tight urban corridor. And then in building form and architectural character, we also went with A as a maybe, C, H, and I. And some of the elements we liked in there were the articulated rooftops, varying depths of building entries, and wood elements and architectural detail that made buildings a little more interesting.
Okay. But that's a pretty diverse mix in terms of style.
Right.
Okay, so where are we here? Who wants to report here? Eric?
Eric is. It's facing you.
Number 9. Well, I'll report on Part A, which is
where we had the most consensus and perhaps, at least to my eyes, the more interesting results, which is to say that we liked all but one of the materials, and we would like to see all of them used because Missoula, one of the characteristics of Missoula is its eclecticism, which is not to say planlessness, which we do have in some places, but to have a mix. The one we didn't like was the concrete masonry, which is C.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what else to report from the sheet. Anybody else?
No, I can see there's a lot of detail there, and we'll look at that later, but thank you very much. No, that's great, but that's a great observation. All right, so we've heard, who do we need to hear from? Who's going to report over here? Heather?
Well, I couldn't get our group to say yes or no to these questions. We had to have a debate. We only filled out part of Part A, and then we were cut off. So we had a pretty strong visceral reaction and said absolutely not to anything with synthetic stucco. So that was a never. And then from there, and we crossed it out. And then the rest of it, we made notes. Certain areas should have things in moderation. Other areas, it could be like the CMU, you could use it in moderation. Exposed wood kind of carried through everywhere, probably a little woodsy because we're in Montana. Metal panels and architectural metal made a showing. Is there anything else you guys would add?
Minimal architectural glass.
Oh yeah, and minimal architectural glass.
Okay, but still eclectic mix. All right, okay. And the best for last, of course, right? Who's going to talk? No? Yes?
Yeah, we talked a lot about 3rd Street in terms of visioning it as a garden corridor and really playing off of the houses and the architecture that's already there, and then looked at B, D, H, and I as ideal pieces that would already work with what was there. And then we talked a lot about between, I think, C and D, and decided that for something like 3rd Street, having C would be more ideal for the setbacks. And then in terms of the corridor design for 3rd Street, we were looking at C and I. Smaller buildings with kind of that eclectic feel, and a little bit dense. So, thanks.
Great. Thanks very much. Obviously, there's much more thought in these materials. So again, as you're leaving, be certain to add any additional little notes, footnotes to help us interpret what you're saying. We're going to be looking at these in a variety of ways. One is just, is there a sense of consistency in the way people responded to a particular corridor or not? Not the specifics of did you like brick or not, is less the question than is there a difference in context? And sometimes it may be even within a sub-area. So that's one of the things I think we're looking for here. And what is that range? We knew coming into this that eclectic, funky, unpredictable, surprising is all a part of the community. You know, we're trying to get a feel on just how funky and predictable, et cetera, it is based on what you're telling us here. So we'll spend a lot of time, we'll have a lot of fun with this. We will put them up on the website so you can look at all of them as well. We're going to put the PowerPoint up on the website so you can relive all the happy moments of the presentation. And you do have some individual comment sheets, which we'd love to have this evening, but if you want to take them and think about them and then send them in, you know where Laval's email is. And what are you holding up? Yeah, I just said that. Yeah. So yeah, hand them to Brad on the way out, or you may leave them on your table. We'll be collecting everything on the table. So, did you have fun? Was this interesting? Well, thanks. We're just, let the record show that, 80 people, that's times 2.5 hours, 90 people, or 100 people. Well, I'm just sort of saying were, 250, 300 person hours of planning and urban design work going on tonight. So very productive. Thank you very much.
Give our comments first. Do we give it to you?
Yeah, you can leave the comment sheets on the table.